Hello darlings and welcome back to my channel. My name is Robin Hahn.
My name is Jacqueline Coe.
And we are disabled opera singers. And this is a story of how we founded Opera Mariposa, Canada's first 100% disability-led and run opera company. Hi darlings, editing Robin here. I don't know if y'all remember the last time I had a video from when Jackie and I were sheltered together in her place, but the audio is real sus. So I'm doing my best. Please bear with me. So I might have to add some more interjections along the way to try to explain bits where the audio is the way that it is. Yeah, that's it. Back to the story.
So this started, I'd say, really started probably when we were 16.
Yeah. We started voice lessons at the same time because we actually went to the same elementary school. We started like 11? 10. Something like that. We went to the same voice teacher, everything. So when I call Jackie my forever partner in operatic crime, I mean forever. Like, since always until our doom. Forever. So, of course, like, as we were developing our voices, as we were building the technique, we both sort of ended up being clearly in opera at the same time, but I think for neither of us was it like a light bulb moment that we were going to be opera singers. It was just
I don't remember the moment I knew.
Nor do I. I think it just sort of became true. And it became true around the same time.
Yeah.
And certainly by 16, it had been true.
Yeah, and 16 was when I sang my first opera. I think you had been in one before then.
Yes.
And we definitely knew that was what we wanted to be doing. We wanted to be being in operas. Later that year, I actually produced my first show. It was a musical review. Yeah. So it was all musical theater, songs that already existed, made a story out of them. And you were in that, and some of our friends and colleagues, and our voice teacher at the time was also in it. Again, we sort of knew that's what we wanted to be doing. We wanted to work on that side of the production as well and to be creative in that way.
But there was the whole disabled opera singer thing.
Yes.
So, to give the TLDR here, Jackie has had ME, or myalgic encephalomyelitis, since the age of 6 that relapsed only a few weeks after we both started voice lessons. So she had been disabled for years, all through the development of her operatic voice. ME is systemic, usually very invisible to the outward eye, but can also pretty much affect any system at any given time. So by this time, she had already been working to make even the act of singing, let alone like standing or getting to rehearsals or auditions, accessible for her for a long time. For context, while I technically had my condition, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, my whole life, it only became disabling to me much later on when I was actively pursuing an operatic career.
Even from that age, I was struggling a little with things like rehearsal schedules, trying to balance my needs with doing opera. And I did do a few different shows at that time, a few different operas, a few different companies. Not all of the companies were aware that I was disabled. Certainly not the first time I worked with them. I would try not to mention it if I could.
And you wouldn't audition if you didn't know that the schedule was manageable already.
Yeah. Also, I'd have times where I was sick. I couldn't have lessons. That meant that I couldn't prepare an aria for an audition. So even if the schedule looked manageable, well, it's not happening this time.
So we already knew at that point, at least, that Jackie would need specific scheduling and rehearsal locations close to home, things that were just hard to come by in auditions. At that point, what percentage of auditions that you saw that theoretically were your flock and you could audition for, what percentage of them did you actually audition for that went by, would you say?
30% or under.
So by the time we were coming up to the birth of Mariposa, it had already been clear that it was just hard to find opportunities. And we already knew that you really liked producing shows and concerts and stuff because you had that experience before that. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't even know at the time that I liked, stage directing. But I knew I liked choreographing ballet. And I think at one night, when we were driving around in the middle of the night in your mom's van, it all sort of came to a head.
Well, I had at that point produced my first fundraising concert, so I'd sort of officially come out as disabled, as chronically ill, and I knew that was something that I wanted to keep doing. I wanted to support charities that were doing research and doing patient advocacy. And we'd sort of been saying for a while, we should call ourselves something. We should like have a name for this, whatever we're doing. We'll call ourselves an opera company because it'll just make it easier. Yeah, and then I think that night was the night we were saying, you know what, we should do a concert. There's all this music that we want to sing. We haven't gotten to sing it yet. I just learned a few new arias. You and I think we're both at the stages where our voices were like changing and developing a bit. We had new repertoire and we wanted to be able to work these pieces and to show them and perform them. Mm-hmm. And we said, well, you know what are the pieces we really want to do? And we made a list, and then we like alternated the pieces. Okay, you do one, I do this one, and then you do this one, and I do this one. Mm-hmm. The part of the conversation that I do remember is that we own a lot of ball gowns, don't we? Mm-hmm. We have enough that we can change our dress for each song.
Yep. Jackie had more than I did, but there was enough overlap in our sizing that I could use some of yours anyway. So like it turned out that we could kind of costume it appropriately for each aria that we were doing. Meaning that if we followed through with this plan, we would have a quick change between each and every aria, which was bananas, but it brought us immense joy to think about in that van. It also brought us immense joy when we eventually did it. But we're still in the van. We're still in the van at this point.
Yeah, and then so we looked at it and we went, wait, we have an entire show here. Let's choose a date. Let's find a venue. Let's go work with a pianist on it. Like, let's do it.
This is the part that I recall super vividly, because in that van, at some point in this conversation, we were like, well, if we're going to do that, we're going to need a name. And then
if we're going to need a name,
that means we're going to need to be an opera company. So when I dropped Jackie off at her mom's house, we sort of waltzed into the living room and we're like, we're starting an opera company. We just sort of announced it to the room.
I did get feedback from our other colleagues later that this didn't surprise them at all. Once we said, we're founding an opera company, they're like, makes sense.
It was always inevitable.
Yeah.
It was.
And so that we did in 2012.
I think so. At the time, we knew that Mariposa needed to be accessible for you, but that was not
that wasn't our core tenet in how we founded it exactly, or definitely not what we were advertising.
Yeah.
Initially, the way we built ourselves was by young singers for young singers, because we also knew, having, been singing and been doing operas for a while, there are a lot of talented singers and a limited number of opportunities, so this would also be helping other people.
Right. And we are based in Vancouver, BC. It's not exactly a bustling hub of operatic culture, right? There was just so little opportunity for people to develop their artistry and build roles. It was like a really sort of cutthroat world, and we knew that if we were going to make an opera company, we would be creating new spaces for young artists to develop in a place that had so few. That was our sort of mandate at the time. Was it accessible for this artist specifically? Yes, that was true.
I was still very much in the space of not always talking about my health and not putting it out there. It was out there, but not going out of my way to put it out there.
Right. It wasn't advertised, but it wasn't hidden completely. Yeah.
But that was also incidental to our public-facing purpose, right? Publicly, we just wanted to put on high-quality, standard repertoire opera in a way that was fun, financially accessible for audiences, and put together in such a way that it supported emerging artists in building the repertoire that they would need to have experience in to pursue their careers. We were there to help with the practical experience, basically, that formal operatic schooling so often leaves out for singers is still so needed to be the well-rounded artists that we can be. And that was a vital mandate too, And we made some genuinely amazing productions over the years. I know I'm tooting my own horn here, but I still swear that Mariposa's 2012 Don Pasquale is the best production of that opera that I have ever seen anywhere, ever. Changed my mind. But so many things that artists create, it turned out that Opera Mariposa was destined to become something we had never really imagined at the beginning. Because, while we had made this whole company accessible specifically for Jackie, its accessibility features spread out rehearsal schedules and low travel venues and stuff, they were just a neutral, non-defining trait of the company as a whole. I didn't know I had my disability at the time. In fact, looking back, I sort of identified as the quote-unquote healthy one of my friend group.
And then fast forward a few years, I'm disabled too. If you don't know the story about that, I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. There's probably a video up here in the card that explains a little bit more about that. But I had been experiencing symptoms for a really long time, but they had been so invasive to my life and my artistic work and my development in my career that I couldn't do the career the way that I had imagined until I was living in Germany trying to pursue a career there. And, lo and behold, the body, she said no. So I came back to Vancouver, worked on building a different type of career, one that I hadn't imagined for myself. And around that time, I was like, hi, I'm not the healthy one in this, in this friend group. And this, I don't remember who sort of looked around and said, oh, that means everyone involved with Mariposa in some way is disabled, right? I don't remember who said that. I don't remember how. I think that was just something that we all sort of noticed had become true.
Yeah.
Kind of simultaneously. And I think from then on, our new mandate and our new sort of mission was obvious.
Yeah.
I don't think we really talked about pivoting. We just did.
No.
It just happened because it had to, because duh. We were the only ones doing the thing. And that was cool and exciting, and we would like to keep doing that. And since then, Opera Mariposa has been, on the cover of Opera America for our advocacy for accessibility in opera. We've done panels, podcasts,
Benefit and awareness shows.
We've worked in advisory capacities with other companies and operatic and artistic infrastructure. It's been a wild ride. But yeah, no decision was made that that's what we would do. We just were already in a position to do it because of... And then when it became true, it just became obvious. And here we are, working on accessible programming.
And of course, in 2020, there were some adjustments.
We haven't done live in-person programming since then because Jackie and others involved in Mariposa are extremely immunocompromised. So instead, Mariposa itself has been involved in small-scale online programming, larger-scale online fundraising events for MECFS advocacy, research, and resource creation. So that has been sort of our focus since 2020. But we are working on more remote and online opera, which the opera world was just beginning to get into at the beginning of the pandemic, and then really seemed to, from the perspective of many immunocompromised folks, kind of drop like a hot potato. But we think that that is a really exciting and accessible way to program opera and to bring opera to people who otherwise can't enter operatic spaces. So keep your eyes peeled.
And that's the story of how Mariposa came to exist.
Yeah, that's it. We're sorry we can't really give you specifics on how to start your own opera company, because that really is dependent on your location, the rules where you are, and your resources, your people, your spoons, your money and time. But I think what we can offer is that if you feel like you want to create an operatic space that maybe is not a traditional one, maybe is an indie one, or maybe just doesn't look like the other opera spaces around you and in your area, that's fine and you should do it, because there isn't just one way to make opera, right? That's the whole point of the idea of having accessible opera, is that accessible doesn't mean the same thing for every single person or for every single community. So if you are making opera that's accessible to you, please do that and tell us about it in the comments. We would love to be able to chat with you fine folks about that, because a more accessible opera community is an opera community that makes opera in more different ways. So now, just speaking from the heart, let me tell you this. If you've been wanting to start an opera company, and if you've been waiting for your sign, this is your sign. And yes, it does take a lot of work and a lot of energy and a lot of time, and that is also not accessible to everyone. But I know there are people out there who are watching this who have been thinking about it and just unsure about it. So if that is you, then this is for you. Take it from me, a human who is currently planning a wedding. Nobody starts planning a wedding knowing how to plan a wedding unless you are a wedding planner. And in the same way, nobody who starts making an opera company knows how to make an opera company until they make an opera company. So figure out what support systems are around you. Go do it. I can't wait to see what you come up with.
If you were looking for a joyful little corner of the internet where we could talk about opera disability, queerness, cats, and tea, you have found it. And if you weren't looking for it, you have found it anyway. So go hit that subscribe button and ring the little bell. Keep the comment section full of joy and light. And I will see you in my next video. Exactly.
Our first, I don't mean to true the
motto? Catchphrase?
Yeah. Word searching.
Subtitle? Oh, let's go with motto and move on.
Yeah.